Welcome to this month's webinar. My name's Anne from Orchid Systems. September is generally the time when Sage releases a new version for Sage 300, so we thought it would be a good time to review what has changed in Orchid's modules since the last release of version 2022 a year ago. In this webinar, we're going to have a sneak preview of our EFT processing for Sage Intacct. We're going to look at the general changes for all Orchid's modules that have happened in 2022. And then we'll look at the individual modules for changes specific to that module. And we'll demonstrate some of these features as we go. First, we're going to have a look at EFT processing for Sage Intacct. The first release of EFT processing for Sage Intacct is going to be AP payments, with AR direct debits and employee expenses to follow. We are currently beta testing the AP payments in multiple geographies. The formats.ini is shared between Sage Intacct and Sage 300. So this means that our over 800 tested formats are used for both products. And we're using single source code, which is compiled for the target product deployments. The formatting engine is the same between Sage 300 and Sage Intacct, and it's just compiled for the appropriate environment. For Sage Intacct, we're using WebAssembly technology for secure processing on your Sage Intacct client, so data is not transferred between servers, and our deployment is fully integrated with Sage Intacct. And I'm now going to demonstrate creating an EFT file using Sage Intacct. Once you have imported the Orchid EFT module and you've assigned security to the appropriate users, you will get this new menu option, Orchid EFT. And the components are the license file, setting up your EFT banks, setting up your EFT formats, the AP payments that need to be included in a file, and the actual file list itself. So the first step to do is to import the formats that you want to use. And you can import as many formats as you need on the site. And you can see this format file is the same as the formats.ini records for our Sage 300 product. Once you've imported the EFT formats, you then go and assign which format you want to use for which vendors. And this is done on the Accounts Payable vendor screen. Vendors or suppliers, depending on your locale. And if we look at one of these vendors which we have configured, you have an additional tab for Orchid EFT. And this is where you select which file type you want to use for this particular vendor. So here we're using the HSBC ISO 20022 format. And then the appropriate fields are turned on for this particular format. If you change this format, you will get different fields that you need to fill in. Once all your vendors are configured, you can go ahead and configure your banks. Here you associate the EFT file type with each of the banks that you want to make EFT payments through. So for example, for our 100 CHK bank, we have got the ANZ format, the ANZ ABA format, and the check all fields format. So per bank you can configure multiple EFT file formats, which enables you to send, for example, both EFT payments for domestic payments, international wire payments, and for positive pay records, all for the same bank account. And that is it from an EFT setup point of view. EFT processing allows you to follow the normal process for your accounts payable, invoices and payments. So you would go ahead and enter your AP invoices. If they required approvals, it would follow your normal process in Sage Intacct. So the AP invoices would be entered and approved, and then you'd come to pay the AP invoices. And again, we're following the normal Sage Intacct processes. You would enter your payments, approve them if you need to, and then they get posted. So EFT processing sits on top of the standard AP processing, AP invoice and payment processing. Once you have a posted payment for a vendor that has been configured for EFT against a bank that has been configured for EFT, then those transactions are available to be included in the next EFT file that you create. And in the EFT menu, when you run the EFT AP payment requests, you get a list of all those payments that have been posted for vendors which have been configured for EFT and a bank that has been configured for EFT and for which no EFT file has been created yet. And in my case, I've got these 6 payments waiting to go. So you can select all, or just select the individual payments that you want to make, and then you'd go ahead and click Generate to generate an EFT file for these 3 payments. Now, as I have selected payments all for the same bank, but for 2 different file formats for the same bank, it's going to create 2 files. If I had included these payments as well, I would end up with 1 file for these transactions, 1 file for this transaction, 1 file for these 2, and 1 file for this transaction. But let me just select the first 3, and I'd go ahead and click Generate. And this would go ahead and create the EFT files for those particular transactions. And you can see we've generated 2 files. And the EFT files can be seen in the EFT file list. I'm currently filtering for only the files that I've created, and here we see all the files that I've created. And the latest 2 that I created are sitting here at the top. So from here we can download the EFT file, and that will create the file according to your file naming convention on the EFT bank on your local drive. We can view the contents of the file, and this is showing you the raw data of the file. We can hold the file. So hold means there's an issue with this file, either it was rejected by the bank or you realized at the time of downloading you got an error message because your details weren't correct. You can hold the file, go ahead and change the details, and then click refresh to refresh the file. We can also delete the file. Delete means keep a record that this file was created, but put the, in this case, 1 payment back onto the EFT AP payment request screen to be reselected. So let's go ahead and download this file. So this file has been downloaded. It's called ANZ with today's date, and we can open the file from here, and you can see this is filtered as per the ANZ format. Once the file has been downloaded, if it is uploaded successfully into the bank, you would come and confirm it, which would change the status to complete. If there was a problem uploading to the bank, perhaps one of the vendor's bank account details was not correct, we could say hold this file. And that's changed the status to on hold. We would now go and update the details, come back and click refresh, which would make us a copy of the file, the details that were included right now, as replaced, and a new file with the refreshed data, waiting to be downloaded and confirmed. So let's download this one. We can have a look at the contents. So it's our HSBC 20022 file. And if that was all good, we could then say, yep, confirmed, which changes the status to confirmed. And that's really the EFT processing in Release 1. I have just demonstrated the main features of Release 1, which includes AP payments. Subsequent releases will include AR direct debits and employee expenses. And please reach out to us if you want more information in this regard. And now moving on to what else we've been up to in 2022. We have released our partner portal, which enables you to pay for the customer renewals and subscriptions online. And you can also view the customer's status and activation codes online. For all our modules, we have released a new install shield process. We no longer prompt for the serial number and activation code during the installation process. These details are entered in the associated license screen for each of the modules once the module has been activated. We now also have online help for all our modules. We still release the old help file, the CHM file, when the module is released, and in some product updates if the CHM file has changed. But the online help allows us to maintain the help as we go. We can also embed tutorials, videos, quick tips, making the online help more useful to both customers and business partners. And I'm now going to demonstrate this to you. After installing and activating the module in the appropriate company, or with an upgrade, you have activated the new version, you would go to the associated modules setup, license screen, and you would key in your serial number and activation code here. And it's on the license screen. It would show you also, if that module had multiple options, what options this particular company is licensed for. Regarding the online help, you can either access it via the individual modules help. In this case, I'm in Inter-Entity Transactions help, and I can click here to go to the Inter-Entity Transactions help section on the online site, or click here to go to all our modules. And then you can select the required module. And the help has the same structure as the F1 help, with all the modules down the side, and then within a module, the individual topics. And we can embed videos and structure the help in a more intuitive way. You can also access the online help from our website. If you go to the resources and then click on the online help. And with Microsoft stopping basic authentication and sending emails via SMTP, we have now included support for MS Graph, for EFT Processing, Extender, Report Runner, Process Scheduler, and Freight SmartLink. That is all our modules that send emails. And we have released a PU for supported versions only, version 2020, 21, and 2022. I'm now going to show you how this is set up in these modules. Using EFT processing as an example, in the setup options, on the associated email tabs for AP, AR, and payroll, this is where you'd fill in your SMTP details if you are sending via SMTP. But if you need to, if basic authentication is being disabled from your Office 365 account, you can enable Microsoft Graph. And then you need to fill in the credentials, the tenant ID, the client ID, and the client secret that you get from your Office 365 administrator, and then you'll be able to send emails using Office 365. And you'll find the same amended configuration options in Extender, Report Runner, Process Scheduler, and Freight SmartLink. If you select MS Graph as opposed to SMTP, you will then fill in the tenant ID, client ID, and client secret. And with respect to web screens, we have released the transaction-oriented screens for EFT, AP, and AR in versions 2021 and above, which I'll demonstrate shortly. And we are work in progress on Notes and Document Management Link. We released the first round of EFT processing screens in the web in mid-2021, but after the 2022 release, we have released some more screens. So in EFT processing, we have the periodic processing of deleting inactive records. EFT setup, we've got options, banks, customers, vendors, and email messages. We have some setup reports for banks, customers, and vendors. We've got the EFT transaction reports for the transfers created, the detailed report, the audit log report, print advices, print receipt batch audit report, and update invoice due date audit report. And in the EFT transactions, we've got create EFT file. So you can set up your EFT options. Including the MS Graph options if you are using Office 365 and don't want to use basic authentication. And you can fill in your EFT bank details. For payments and receipts. And typically when you're using web screens, you do not have access to a folder on the server to create the file. So you would normally set your file to be downloaded at the time of creation. Your EFT customer records. And your EFT vendor records. And once your payment processing is complete, you would go ahead and create the EFT file and then print the remittance advice. And this year we included a new security group so that only admin users can recreate an EFT file, or those who are allowed to by the new security group. And then you'd go ahead and print or email the remittance advices. That is just a quick look at our EFT web screens, including some of the new screens that we have included in 2022. And as I mentioned before, we are work in progress on Notes and Document Management Link in web screens. And what we're busy with now is our version 2023 releases. The development is in progress, and we hope to be releasing the modules over the next 60 days, starting with EFT in October. And now we're going to have a look at the new features module by module. In EFT processing, we have created a new security group, and without this security group, you are not able to recreate an EFT file. With the clearing bank, when you post the AP payment batch against a clearing bank, a bank transfer is done between the clearing bank and the real bank account, and it used to always be the next transfer number up. But now you can configure the transfer to be numbered by the AP payment batch number, which makes for easier bank reconciliation. If you are FTPing the EFT file when you create it to a FTP site, we now have two new options for two-factor authentication. So you can specify the user ID and password and the key file and the password or passphrase to the key file. We've also enabled a test on the EFT options screen so you can test the upload. For our web screens, we included a new option for the EFT file, so when it's created you can download it directly into your browser. We now enable the T4As to be emailed to the employees, and these options I'm going to show you in EFT Processing. We've also created an EFT Superview to support customizations during the Create EFT File process. And where we've used this is to enable you to create an EFT file, encrypt it using PGP encryption, and then upload it to the bank. So previously we would not be able to step in between the Create EFT file and the upload, but with the Superview we are now able to do things before the EFT file is created, after the EFT file is created, before it's uploaded to the SFTP site, and after it's uploaded to the SFTP site, so we don't have to recode any of those functions. And the PGP encryption is done using Extender. We've included support for MS Graph when emailing, and we've embedded Lua functions in the EFT format file, so you are able to write Lua code to do more complicated formatting. And this is needed when banks have multiple formats like SWIFT payments as well as wire transfers as well as EFT, and they allow you to do all those file payments in a single file. And we needed something more sophisticated in order to know which fields to include in the file. So by embedding Lua, we now have all the Lua functions that we can use while formatting the data for the appropriate files. And now I'm going to demo some of those new features in EFT Processing. In EFT Options, on the AP Email tab, AR Email tab, and Payroll Email tab, you can now select Microsoft Graph as a method for sending emails rather than SMTP. And for your EFT banks, for the files that are created, you can select to download if you are using the web screens and you want to download the EFT file using your browser. If you are SFTPing the file, we've always been able to SFTP with a password and with a key file, but we can now SFTP with two-factor authentication, which means you specify the host, the username and user password, the key file, and the passphrase or key file password. And with those details, you'll be able to upload the file. And when you fill in those details, you can test the SFT file upload from here. Previously, you had to actually create an EFT file to see if it would be uploaded, but now we can test the process from this screen. And if you're using a clearing bank account so that the details of the AP posting bank gets posted against the clearing bank account, and when posted, EFT does a bank transfer between the clearing bank account and your real bank account, so you have a single entry for the EFT file. If you are using this process, we used to always do the bank transfer with the next allocated bank transfer number, but now you can either use the next bank transfer number or use the AP batch number if that is easier for reconciliation purposes. And finally, when you are running Create EFT File, depending on your security authorizations, if you do not have the authority to re-export a file, then you will get this error message. Previously, you just got a warning message and you could go ahead anyway. Now, in order to recreate a file that has already been created, you need to have the security group. You need to have this option in your security profile, Recreate EFT File. And Susan is in the Enter group and is not able to recreate the EFT file. And finally, if you have EFT for payroll and Canadian payroll, you now have the ability to print, which is email, the T4As. So that gives you a quick summary of the new features in EFT Processing. For Process Scheduler, we have included support for MS Graph emailing. So in the process scheduler options, you'll be able to select MS Graph instead of SMTP. And we have included support for complex passwords in Sage 300. That was delivered as part of the latest System Manager PU earlier this year. So we no longer validate the password is uppercase, and we allow the entry of upper and lowercase and special characters in the password to match Sage's current rules. And this is where you're defining the password for your company where you're going to configure all your schedules, as well as all the companies that you want to run schedules in. In inter-entity transactions and trade, we have included the same complex password support so that for your entity database mappings and your trade companies, you are able to enter the complex passwords that you may set up in Sage 300. And this was introduced in a product update in the middle of this year. We have renamed some of the GL triggers columns to make it a little bit clearer when you're setting up entity substitutions and account substitutions, as well as including additional field mappings for the expected arrival date and expected shipment date in the OEPO trade mappings. And this is what I'll demonstrate for you now. In inter-entity transactions in your OEPO trade setup, for all your OE documents to PO or PO to OE, so let's use the OE sales order to PO order as an example, you are able to configure to send to both the PO expected arrival date as well as the PO detail expected arrival date. So looking at the PO header expected arrival date, you can send the OE header expected ship date, and you can send to the PO detail expected arrival date either the OE detail deliver by date or the OE detail expected ship date. And similarly, if we look at one of the PO to OE documents, we can send a date to the OE header expected ship date and the OE detail expected ship date or expected deliver date. So looking at the OE expected ship date, we could send the PO header expected arrival date. And then looking at the detail lines, we can send either the PO detail expected arrival date, or if we don't do any mapping, then the original defaulting on the document will happen as per the OE processing. And for RMA processing, we have included support for complex passwords that was introduced in the Sage 300 System Manager in the latest PU. And we've also included multiple contact support when emailing RMA instructions to the customer. And I'm going to show you this now. In the RMA forms for the return authorization, you are able to email to the customer using the customer's contact or email address, or using their email address set up on the RMA customer record. And previously, if you chose customer, it was assuming that it was the customer email address or the customer's contact email address. There was no provision if you had selected multiple contacts on the customer record. If you do want to use multiple contacts in AR, then in the RMA options, you need to turn on this option to use AR multiple contacts. And then against your customers, you'll be able to go and configure an email address to be used for RMA. You'll be able to configure a contact code and the appropriate RMA options, whether you send the RMA return authorization to this particular contact or the RMA instruction to this particular contact. And now in RMA forms, by selecting customer, it will go to the customer record and find the relevant contacts for the RMA return authorization or the RMA return instruction. And in bin tracking, we have included a new PO receipt form, which shows you the suggested bins for the put away based on your auto put away rules. And we have a bin transfer form. So if you're doing a bin transfer from one bin to another bin, there's now a form that supports that movement with the suggested bins. And what's new in Information Manager? In Document Management Link, we have added the variables org-id and YYYY for the system date year, and these can be included in your path. So this means you can do configurations in one company and import and export into another company without changing the hard-coded organization ID. The rename now works in SharePoint. So you've always been able to rename a file when you're using your network folders, but now the same rename works in SharePoint. We have added an F5 refresh list. So if you are dragging and dropping documents into boxes, the current box that you're dropping into will always refresh, but you may be showing that same document in another box, which won't auto-refresh. But you can click F5 now to auto-refresh, and I'll show you this. We have included support for app password in the SharePoint authentication. We have created a conversion from Modulo's e-image pack to DML. The conversion is done using Extender, but you can now configure your DML and then have the Modulo documents moved and renamed as per your DML configuration. And now I'm going to show you the F5 functionality in DML. In Document Management Link, when you are dragging and dropping or adding a file to a DML box, so I'm going to drag the invoice into INV 199, DML renumbers the document if it's configured to do that, as well as puts it in the appropriate directory. But this directory is also shown down here. So to force a change, I can hit function key F5. And the document is now visible here too. Previously, you'd need to step off this invoice and come back to this invoice to see the second box refresh. We have done a full webinar regarding the conversion from Modulo e-image pack to DML. So if you're interested in that, please search for that on our website to see how the conversion is configured and run. In Report Runner, we have included support for MS Graph emailing. In Notes, we have a new link from the IAM note type to the IAM roles. So you can straight away, on creating or changing a note type, you can go and configure the roles for that particular note type. And I'm going to demonstrate that now. In IAM Setup, Note Types, this is where you maintain your IAM notes. You create the note type, define whether you allow multiple notes per note type, and specify the default category. And previously, you would then go to roles to assign the roles for this particular note type. But it was a step that was often forgotten and a big support issue. So now we have a link to remind you on your note types that after creating one, you need to go and assign this note type to the appropriate roles and the appropriate permissions. Add, view, edit, delete within that role. And finally, in Information Manager, for optional tables, we have included support for 64-bit Excel in the Excel add-in when you are uploading your budget information from Excel. And I'll show you that now. In Information Manager Transactions, using the entry from Excel, you are able to upload your budget figures from an Excel spreadsheet using the Excel add-in. So opening up an existing spreadsheet, if these were our budgeted figures for our customer and item sales, we can use the add-in to update these through back into Sage 300. And now with the latest product update of Information Manager, you can use this add-in in both the 64-bit Excel and the 32-bit Excel. Previously, we could work only in the 32-bit version of Excel. And that highlights what's new in Information Manager. For Info Explorer, we have created some new sample cubes and updated some existing sample cubes. We have updated the PO analysis cube, and this gives you purchase orders analyzed by expected delivery date, and we've included some new views in that cube. And we've also provided two multi-company analysis cubes. One is order entry sales by customer and item across two companies, and one is the AP purchases by GL account across two companies. And you can easily change the organization ID in the queries to include your own two companies in these queries. And these are up on our website. You can download them from the Sample Cubes page. And what's new in Extender? We have released the Extender Marketplace. The Extender Marketplace showcases applications that have been created using Extender and have been released by all third-party developers working with Extender. On the Marketplace, you can see the applications are all grouped together by module, and it will give you an indication of what modules are available and some ideas on what can be done with Extender. And if you were interested in any of these modules, you would contact the relevant developer and get the relevant details from them. And I'm just going to point out some of the new Extender applications now. In Document Management Link, we have created the e-image pack to Document Management Link conversion. So this allows you to move and rename documents from e-image pack folders to Document Management Link folders. For EFT Processing, we have created the EFT PGP encryption. So this allows you to PGP encrypt the EFT file once it is created. And if you are uploading it to a bank SFTP automatically, then the encrypted file is uploaded to the bank. For bin tracking, we have an app which allows you to select a bin, and then all items, serials, and lots within that bin will be transferred to the other selected bin without having to individually select the items and serials and lots. And not new, but sometimes overlooked, we have the AR aging and the AR credit status apps, which display the current AR aging and current AR credit status in a note, and you can configure this note beside OE shipments or OE orders wherever the information is needed. And the blue fields are hyperlinked, so you can drill into the aging transactions in the different buckets or drill into the open orders. And also not new but often overlooked is the EFT app, which allows you to drill to the EFT screens from the source screen. So for example, on AP vendors, you've got to drill to the AP EFT vendor screen. From the AR customer, you've got to drill to the AR EFT customer screen. And on the AP payment batch list, you can drill to create EFT file. And on the AR refund or the AR receipt batch list, you've got to drill to the create EFT file. And now to new features in Extender Workflow. We have included some new workflow actions. You can now attach a crystal report to the email regarding a workflow instance waiting your attention. For example, you could PDF the AP batch listing or PDF the purchase order and send it with the email. You can also attach a crystal report to any remote action email, again, like the PDF of the AP batch listing or the PDF of a PO. And here is an example showing the PDF of the PO being sent with the remote action email. There's also a new action to determine whether or not a user is a member of a particular user group. And you can use this yes/no answer to guide the next step in your workflow. We have released the Workflow Anywhere app, and this allows you to approve or reject or progress workflow instances on any mobile device, like an Android phone, an iOS phone or tablet, or a Windows mobile device. And we've got a new sample PO approval workflow template, which includes remote action service, actions, and emails. And finally, in the Extender developer environment, we have increased the usability of the module screen by linking the module to all the other setup screens that are components of the module. And I'll show you this. We have included Python version 3.8.8, so you can now select which version of Python you want to use. You are able to use a function called set color and set font on your screens to highlight information. There have been performance improvements in Extender scripts attached to views, so this comes into play if you have multiple scripts attached to the same view and multiple instances of that view active. For example, an OE shipment with 100 lines and with 3 scripts attached to the shipment detail line. So there's improvements that you can take advantage of in your coding. You can attach files to message templates. These are configured attachments that you want to go out every time the email is sent, for example, terms and conditions, and I'll show you that. When you're creating new scripts, depending on the type of script you're creating, a UI script or a view script, we default some sample code for you to help you creating the new script. And for your own screens and tables, you can now apply a mask to a field to hide the contents of the field, for example, when entering passwords. And as with the other modules, we have included support for MS Graph when emailing. Let's have a look at the module screen and attaching files to message templates. The module screen now opens up with the original module list in the middle here, but linking to all the other components of the module. So looking at the PO approval workflow module, I can see these are the scripts that are associated with that module, if any event types are associated with the module, all the messages that are associated with the module, if this module has any events, any view scripts. So you can see this module has workflows attached both to the purchase order and the purchase requisition. Any custom tables associated with the module, workflow templates, and here we have the requisition and purchase order workflow templates, if the module has any specific menu items, and if the module has any configured icons on the top of the screen. And from any of these components attached to the module, double-clicking on the component will open up the original data entry screen. So this is the same as the script screen in the Extender options. And we could open the message templates from here, etc. So it just makes seeing what's part of the module and maintaining the components of the module much easier. And this is an example of us using color and font. So in this case, it's warning me that we have an EFT module adding the buttons to the screens, which has not been imported into this database. And I could go ahead and import, or not now or never. And that pretty much wraps up all our new features in Extender and all our other modules this year. Please go to our website, orchid.systems, for further information on all our modules and the product downloads, etc. Thanks for watching.